My name is Acharya Shunya, and I am a scholar and teacher of ancient philosophy and spirituality that comes from India, known as Vedic wisdom. This wisdom precedes all religions that come from India: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. This philosophy is all about leading an awakened life, a conscious life, and a beautifully prosperous and empowered life. And I am the author of several books that have forwarded this Vedic wisdom in the world, beginning with Ayurveda lifestyle wisdom, which is the teachings of how to be healthy and happy. And this book went on to become a top award winning book amongst the top 10 books in alternative medicine in America. Then I've written Sovereign Self, which brings the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and non dual teachings of the Vedas into our daily life and relationships. And finally, I have authored this book, Roar Like a Goddess. This book is all about feminine power, feminine Shakti, as we say that in Sanskrit, in the language of the Vedas. And this feminine Shakti is connected with a spiritual source energy or a source entity or a source presence, which we call the divine feminine. Um, and the divine feminine could be understood through the lens of religion. It could also be understood through the lens of mythology. And what I've tried to do is explain or elucidate divine feminine and its inherent Shakti or power through the lens of Vedic mythology of goddesses known as Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. So Durga's mythology is all about how she, roars with righteous courage and power and forbearance and self-reliance. And we find these stories of her battling these dark and ignorant and lusty entities, and reminds me of what we women today have to contend with sexual objectification, diminishing in our roles at home or at work, being sized up as somehow being less valuable to the planet for doing the same work. And I've had to, and my students are doing it. They're channeling that Durga energy to call a spade to begin with, to call out at any injustice that they face and not just take on the mantle of historic silence and stoic suffering. Then we have the goddess Lakshmi and her mythology, which I shared the book, where she is said to be the goddess of prosperity and wealth and pleasure. And she's always dressed in these gorgeous clothes, and all the jewels and rubies and gems of the world are adorning her. And it is said that it is this goddess who really is enjoying every pleasure from within us, because she dwells within us. So when we're biting into a sweet apple, or we're enjoying sexual foreplay, or we are enjoying family and get-togethers, it's really this Lakshmi energy around us. And in and in the and in popular art, we can often see Lakshmi surrounded by gold coins and gems and jewels, and all that's fine. But then I share her deep mythology, where once, and here's a story for you, once she was living in the heavens, making everybody there, all the gods there, the Hindu gods, really happy and prosperous and abundant and enjoying the life, because they had Lakshmi, and Lakshmi is literally the lucky factor, the energy, the divine feminine energy that makes them all really enjoy life and every moment of it. But once the king of heaven, known as Indra in mythology, was gifted a garland, a flower garland by a human sage. Back then in timelessness, humans and gods and goddesses, they all met up and created these beautiful stories. Well, because Indra was the king of heaven and because he was distracted or he got garlands all the time, he kind of just tossed it. And it fell with a thud on his elephant. And elephants have a mind of their own. And he twirled it around and threw it, and it fell again all the way from heaven on earth to earth with a big thud. And Lakshmi saw this because she had divine vision. She could see everything. And she felt personally really pained because she is the goddess of everything that is pleasurable and beautiful and natural and whole. And so she lived in every petal of every flower that was strung on that garland. And she personally felt that Indra was taking her gifts or her manifestations as gifts for granted. She felt it, she didn't see a garland being tossed. She felt tossed herself. And this is fascinating that in timelessness, we have this beautiful goddess feeling tossed. And how many women have felt tossed in their life, taken for granted? Somewhere they have a gorgeous bedroom or a castle to live in, but they're still neglected, made to feel invisible, like they don't matter. Their gifts, their presence don't matter. And Lakshmi, being a goddess, did something that really makes that mythological tale stand out for me. She just got up and she left. And when she left, she disappeared into the ocean of consciousness. She returned to her formless nature rather than being in form. And when she left the mythological heaven and all the characters who dwelled in it, they no longer enjoyed all her gifts. Um, Spring came about, but the buds were rotting. They were butterflies, but their wings were falling. They had appetite, but they couldn't taste the food. They had wine, but it felt rancid. They had sexual desire, but they could not reach an orgasm. There was nothing that was giving them even a moment of pleasure, and they could experience this sadness and depression and this continued melancholy within them. And they knew that Lakshmi, the goddess, had departed not just from heaven, quote unquote, but really from their consciousness, from their heart, from their being. They no longer could be happy in any true sense. And so they had to churn the ocean. And we have this huge story that's like at the epicenter of the Indian culture, the churning of the ocean. And the gods had to partner with the non godly folks because you needed to kind of involve everyone to churn the ocean. And they had to bring a mountain in to make it a rod so that, and then they had to bring a huge snake which wrapped around the mountain so they could do them some churning. And as the ocean churned, which is representative of as we churn our own consciousness, as we churn our own awareness, and the gods here represent the forces of light, and the non godly folks represent the forces of darkness. And as we churn that, gradually this goddess power, this goddess Shakti, this goddess Lakshmi energy, she rises again to bless all beings. And by now, everybody has learned their lessons and they're all looking at her. Will she choose us? Will she come and live with us? Who's she going to now belong to? Because everybody wants to possess a goddess like Lakshmi. But she had shown by leaving that the single valuable asset we can all have is self-value. So she had really shown how self-value is the begin all and end all of prosperity and abundance, really. And because she represents self value, she was not going to quickly choose the next set of, people that she was going to go be with. Ultimately, her eyes locked with the Hindu god Vishnu. And in his eyes, she only saw pure love, no greed, no wanting, no desire, just an equal match. And so she put a garland around him because she was holding on to that same beautiful garland. And she put it around Vishnu. And ever since then, she became Divine Mother, um, paired with the Divine Father in that mythology and in that culture, the Hindu culture from India. But I love this story because it represents being able to make a change. It represents not putting up with being taken for granted. It represents spending time with yourself, detached, separated out from the situation, to really consider what is your value, to be able to manifest the partner who really loves you, respects you, and honors you for who you are. Her emergence shows that she didn't have to just separate from the world that hurt her. She came back again, but this time she was not just this goddess in the back chambers of the heaven making a party for everybody else to enjoy. She rose and became the Divine Mother for all of existence. That goddess who valued herself became the ultimate goddess for all times to come. This and such stories, stories like this one and more such stories, stories of Durga, the goddess of power and the battles she won, will teach readers about how to have healthy boundaries, how to make self-respect an unconditional personal dharma, a personal value, how to lead out of box lives where we don't have to worry that we've turned 30, we're not married, or we're a spinster, or we're a divorcee. But really, like, flowing your power as you are, who you are, and as Divine Mother chose you to be. Lakshmi's teachings are all about wealth and prosperity and sexual pleasure, but not before self value, not before understanding how to value yourself, which leads to self worth, self esteem, and radical self respect. And finally, there is the goddess Saraswati and her teachings, which really represent the teachings of tuning into your inner song, because she's often shown wearing white clothes, which represent like she's not colored by the world. And then she's playing this musical instrument called veena, or like a lute, and she's listening to her own music, which represents like not paying so much attention to the worldly sounds and the worldly recommendations and societal injunctions, and tuning within to really get that goddess message from within. What is your next purpose? What is going to be your next move? What do you choose to hold on to? What do you choose to let go? Discernment is a big teaching by this goddess, and I have shared so many stories about each goddess because storytelling brings the lesson home. They can always say, do this and don't do this. But when we have goddesses from mythology acting as role models, then these goddesses become archetypes for all of us for all times to come. One need not be a Hindu or even a woman, a biological woman, to benefit from this book. One can be of any religion, an agnostic, or even an atheist, because everybody needs power. Everybody needs self value, and everybody needs to trust their inner voice. And I compare roaring to really claiming or reclaiming that authentic voice in the human jungle. In fact, I begin with the book with a question: what is our voice? Is it a placating voice, a seductive voice, a manipulative voice, an explaining voice, a begging voice, a daddy's, princess voice, a husky, seductive voice? What is our voice? And then I compare our voice to that of a roar, because when that lioness roars, it's authoritative. There is no question mark who is speaking now. So, roar like a goddess is not about religion, but really about borrowing some archetypes from an ancient tradition and bringing some lessons home that we people in the 21st century need, especially those people who, due to their gender or color or race, have become marginalized or have been disempowered systemically. Because in the climate of patriarchy, often the female body, the feminine gender identified bodies, gender expansive bodies, queer bodies, disabled bodies, and older bodies, well, they're considered weak and they are not considered worthy of sharing power with. But we are going to roar like the goddess, reclaim our power, and live it. That is my hope that this book will do. It will become a roaring movement of its own kind. I hope you get to read it and roar with your own inner goddess power available to you forever and ever hereafter.